Breaking tonight, a newly declassified annex to the Durham investigation is casting fresh light on how the Trump-Russia story first took shape. Republican lawmakers argue the document supports claims that operatives connected to the Clinton campaign tried to link then-candidate Donald Trump to Moscow as part of the 2016 campaign. The Senate Judiciary Committee made the annex public today, and its chairman described the release as evidence of one of the largest political scandals and cover-ups in recent memory. Our reporting traces what the newly available pages show and what they leave unresolved. Welcome to Political Plot, where we cut through the noise to reveal the power plays shaping American politics. Today we're diving into a newly declassified annex to the Durham report that raises fresh questions about how the Trump-Russia narrative began, including intercepted emails suggesting political maneuvering and possible mishandling by intelligence agencies. We'll unpack what the document actually shows, what it leaves unanswered, and why those gaps matter for accountability and public trust. The Durham inquiry began in 2019 and produced a long report in 2023. This newly unsealed annex of roughly 30 pages offers additional material that critics say points to an organized effort to sow a narrative tying Trump to Russian actors. Among the items cited are emails attributed to an individual associated with an international philanthropic network connected to a prominent progressive donor. Intelligence collectors reportedly intercepted those messages and passed them to investigative teams. The annex summarizes several of those exchanges and places them in the context of summer 2016 political maneuvering. In the notes attributed to the philanthropy associate, a campaign advisor is referenced using familiar nicknames. One exchange, if authentic, describes a strategy to demonize both Putin and Trump to cultivate a post-convention political boost. Another message suggests high-level approval for a plan to emphasize allegations that foreign hackers were manipulating US politics, a tactic that would shift attention away from the candidate's own controversies. The advisor named in the documents told investigators she did not draft and did not recall receiving the intercepted notes, a point the annex records alongside the raw correspondence. The annex also highlights questions about how early intelligence was handled by the FBI. According to the declassified text, the Bureau was alerted to the possibility that some of the material it had received might have origins either in domestic campaign activity or in a foreign disinformation campaign. The annex alleges those cautions were dismissed as not credible, and that no investigative steps were taken to verify or disprove the flagged leads before they were set aside. That account fuels arguments by critics who say important lines of inquiry were not pursued. Administration officials and allies immediately seized on the declassification. White House spokespeople said the annex bolsters claims that the Clinton campaign endorsed a strategy to undermine President Trump by pressing allegations of ties to Moscow. Former and current officials who advocated for the document's release joined the rollout and underscored what they view as missed opportunities by intelligence leaders to dig deeper into the provenance and motives behind the materials circulating in 2016. Several people named in the annex declined to comment publicly when contacted. Others defended their conduct and pushed back against suggestions of a coordinated smear campaign. Separate from the annex, a whistleblower within the intelligence community has come forward to say they tried to raise alarms about manipulated reporting that linked Trump to Russia, but that their supervisors did not act on those concerns. That additional allegation has drawn attention from oversight offices and intensified calls for further review. Debate is now focused on what the new pages prove versus what they merely suggest. Supporters of the president say the annex confirms a deliberate attempt to manufacture a Russian narrative for political advantage. Many national security veterans and critics urge caution, noting the annex is a single piece of a sprawling record that includes multiple inquiries, public reporting, and countervailing assessments. They warn against drawing sweeping conclusions from the fragmentary material alone. The timeline that matters centers on late July 2016, days before the Democratic convention, when a cache of stolen emails appeared online and created a political crisis. Campaign leaders publicly blamed Russian interference and said those leaks were intended to damage their candidate. The annex, if its contents are authentic, records private conversations among political operatives and allied institutions about how to frame the episode going forward, and whether that framing might blunt attention to other controversies. Former intelligence officials emphasize that Russia did attempt to interfere in the 2016 election. For them, the enduring questions are how various American actors responded and whether officials assessed the evidence in a balanced way. Critics of the FBI argue that early decisions were made with incomplete information, and that the Bureau's handling of raw, potentially tainted reporting contributed to the rise of a partisan narrative. Investigators and commentators are scrutinizing what was done and what was omitted. The annex claims some leads were dismissed without follow-up, and critics say those omissions allowed politically useful threads to circle in the public sphere unchallenged. Supporters of law enforcement counter that the full picture includes classified assessments, corroborating evidence, and procedural constraints that do not appear in a short annex. Lawmakers are split in their reactions. Some call for additional declassification and new oversight hearings. Others insist that any allegations of wrongdoing should be settled in court and not simply in the court of public opinion. Several Democrats caution that the annex must be read in full context alongside the myriad reviews and bipartisan reports that examine different aspects of the 2016 investigations. Questions now extend beyond the content of the emails to broader procedural concerns. Why were these pages kept in a classified annex? Who placed them there? And why were they stored in burn bags? Are there other documents that, once released, would change the narrative yet again? Those procedural queries are driving renewed demands for transparency from congressional committees, and from those who feel the American public was kept in the dark. The political response has been swift and partisan. The White House and its allies portray the annex as vindication of long-standing complaints about biased intelligence and institutional motives. Opponents warn that selective public releases risk producing a misleading impression and that only a thorough, methodical review can resolve lingering doubts. At its heart, the dispute is about how democratic systems handle allegations that combine hacked materials, foreign meddling, and partisan strategies. It raises fundamental issues. Did agencies follow sound investigative practices when presented with ambiguous, possibly manipulated intelligence? And if mistakes were made, who should be accountable years after the fact? For members of the public, the release will feel familiar to some and revelatory to others. Investigators on both sides say the annex adds texture, but does not close the book. They call for further testimony, additional records, and careful legal work before final judgments are rendered. Congressional hearings are being scheduled, and legal teams are combing the annex for actionable items. Expect immediate political fallout and legal maneuvers as both sides press their assertions. More declassifications may follow, and the debate will likely shape public memory of the 2016 cycle for years to come. We will keep following developments closely and will report updates as lawmakers and investigators pursue answers.